Welcome to session 2 of the first lecture series. And in this session, I will be talking about one of my favourite topics, creativity. However, being a creative person is not enough to be an innovator. Creativity must be paired with the ability to recognise and take the right opportunities as they arise. I used to think about creativity like this. To me, creativity was something magical, somewhat like the nature of consciousness. It's a mystery that needs to be solved, unpacked, and understood. For many years, I believed that it was something about you as a person, that it was a talent, a characteristic, something that you were born with and was inherent. I then learnt that you could teach people how to draw, and supposedly this was by focusing on the right side of the brain. This was a revelation. Anyone can draw. I was intrigued with the concept that creativity sat in one part of the brain and that some people were more naturally inclined to be creative. I have since learnt that neither of these beliefs are true. Creativity is, in fact, a function of just being human. We all have the inherent ability to be creative. Creativity is critical to design thinking. So my research took me into understanding the science of creativity and what causes the moment of creative insight, that aha moment. I started researching everything I could about the psychology of creativity. I very quickly learnt that there are many opinions and conflicting views about why and how we are creative. Creativity was believed to be a social function. Some people believed that it was something developed out of psychological factors, events triggered in childhood, experiences, or even biological characteristics. There are many variations, including evolutionary psychology. People talk about a flow state, motivation for creativity, and various other rationale for the cause of creativity. Theories include Wallace's theory of creativity. Other theories followed this after the cognitive revolution, including Guilford's structure of intellect model, which brought us the concept of divergent and convergent thinking, and tests for creativity, such as the Torrens test for creative thinking. Most of the theories of creativity revolve around observation of the behaviour and actions of people. However, the combination of research into cognitive psychology as well as neuroscience has brought us closer to really understanding what happens when people create something new or develop a new idea. We have since learnt that creativity has a function in neuroscience. To understand how creativity happens in the brain, you have to really understand the functions of the brain. The brain is, at its simplest, a pattern recognition system. It's used for prediction and to decrease uncertainty, to enable us to process and function in the everyday world. Our brain is constantly running multiple predictive scenarios about everything that could happen in an effort to prepare and respond to the world around us. So this was a revelation for me. Our brain doesn't just respond to the world, it is constantly predicting what could happen around us. There are also many other things that combine to make the brain work the way that it does. So our vision, for example, drawing connections, is actually about perception, not necessarily reality. We see and believe that things that are there that just aren't. So, for example, here we see a Dalmatian, or not. You may claim to see an elephant looking the opposite way, and this is an example of the Gestalt principle. We also see objects due to similarity, and we perceive structures and patterns. How many black dots can you see? Well, despite what your eyes are telling you, there are no black dots. There are only white dots that appear to darken in the periphery of your vision. This is an example of a scintillating grid illusion. Our brain uses a bunch of assumptions, shortcuts, or stereotypes so that we can function in our complex world. And that also means that we have a whole heap of biases. There is a whole area in economic psychology, or also known as behavioural economics, which is dedicated to the understanding of cognitive bias and how this is used to influence human behaviour. Simply, there are two modes of thinking, fast or slow. Fast is used instinctively and slow is much more deliberative. So some core points about creativity. What we do know about the brain is that we use our whole brain when being creative. There is no such thing as left or right brain distinction. Our brain is a very sophisticated pattern recognition system that uses advanced scaffolding between thoughts, perceptions, concepts to help us think. This is uniquely human. Our memory is actually a function of prediction and helping us to respond to the future. We use the past to shape the future. Our brain also uses metaphors or analogies to help us solve or think through problems. Fables, stories, and narrative is how our brain can form templates from solving a problem in one situation and then apply it in a different context. This is something that is primarily seen in humans and only seen at a very basic level in some animals. Because our brain uses memory to help us predict the future and prepare responses for future actions, the greater the exposure you have to different experiences, people, and ideas, the more opportunities for creative connections you have. Finally, creativity is more likely to happen when we feel safe and happy. It means that our animal brain is not operating in the fast mode, the automatic mode we have for survival. So what is creativity? Common definitions tell us that it's about bringing something new into existence. Unfortunately, that doesn't really give us a clear picture of what creativity is. Creativity is a relatively modern concept. Our ancestors thought of creativity in terms of things such as genius, talent, invention, discovery, and imagination. These terms and their meaning have particular connections to social, political, and economic conditions of different times in history. The word creativity first came into being in 1875 in relation to one of Shakespeare's works. It was described as poetic creativity. This changed its meaning from the act of creating to being a word describing a trait or phenomenon. A great deal of research still centres around two core concepts relating to creativity, and these are novelty or originality and value or appropriateness. And this is how many define it in academia. But where do new ideas come from? How do people create something new? There are a number of ways to look at this process. I like Koestler's explanation of it as a process of bisociation. Arthur Koestler believed that the way new ideas were formed was through the recombination of ideas in different ways. Rather than association, which is the connection of ideas related around a topic or a theme, bisociation is conceptually combining ideas in a new manner to come up with something new. And this is shown as being on a different plane of thinking, or as two different paradigms that intersect in a perpendicular manner. Of course, this is just conceptual, but it gives us a way of unpacking and understanding the creative process. Here are some examples of how this works. So what do you get if you combine a phone with a satellite? You get GPS, maps, tracking. What about a phone with shopping, online shopping, and deliveries? Saving or banking with time, automated banking. And here's a good one. Everyone should get this. A phone with satellite, film, and shopping. Netflix. So when some people appear to come up with ideas as if by magic or as some kind of genius, it is actually not the case. It comes down to a range of factors that have been in fact primed in the mind to be in the space where the right connections and the combination of thoughts come together to give you the new idea. At the core of creativity and the ideation process is about divergent and convergent thinking. Ideation requires the ability to expand our thinking process and allow ideas to flow. This requires imagination, but also the freedom to be imaginative without judgment, self-judgment, or the judgment of others. Divergent thinking requires us to explore options and run scenarios that might provide a different perspective on a situation. When all of those ideas are extracted, we then start to recombine ideas, evaluate, and prioritize concepts. The most common way to do this is with brainstorming. Brainstorming, in its broadest sense, is a process of trying to quickly generate as many ideas as possible in a short amount of time. By rapidly putting down as many ideas as possible, people exhaust the most obvious or the heuristic ideas first, and then they move on to less common and more radical ideas as they are pushed beyond the brain's tested ideas. Good brainstorming pushes people into the uncomfortable thinking zone and will also use other techniques to help stimulate ideas or challenge the brain's natural biases. The most common way to do brainstorming is in a workshop, face-to-face. The process is then to ask each person to generate as many ideas as possible in a short period of time, often asking them to focus on an area of a problem space, or at intervals asking them to reframe how they're coming up with solutions. So, for example, you might challenge participants by asking them to come up with ideas based on how Google might solve it, or how you would solve the problem with only $100. These types of frames help change how the brain connects ideas. After all of the ideas are exhausted, ideas are shared and people are asked to build on other people's ideas. This brings other people's perspectives to the original ideas and helps make new and unexpected connections. There are many variations on this process, but this is at the core of what it means to brainstorm. So there are a number of group processes that use the divergent and convergent process. Here are some examples. So we have the direct ideation process, such as brainstorming, brainwriting, brainswarming, cheat storming, or chain storming. Also improvisation or visualization. There are strategic play games such as Lego Serious Play. We have creative innovation games, or even TRIZ, which is the theory for inventing problem solving. Then we have other ways of helping stimulate creativity. So using things like reframing and thinking, Scamper method, the 6 thinking hats, Edward de Bono, crowdsourcing, and open innovation. Well, all of these things in the creative process sounds pretty straightforward, as long as you have a trained facilitator or designer who knows how to direct or manage the group dynamics. But organisations and teams don't always have these kinds of resources. I've also mentioned that brainstorming is a process fraught with all kinds of thinking bias. And these are caused by factors such as things like dominant personalities, groupthink, self-censorship or self-evaluation bias, social loafing or free riding. Conductive creative workshops or process so that they work takes real skill. Brainstorming conducted in groups of similar people can end up acting like an echo chamber. So be careful with these. Ideas can become stereotyped and lack creativity. Good brainstorming requires a well-defined problem, diversity in participants, and good facilitation. So basically, ideas are the recombinations of bits and pieces of information or other ideas that come together to form a new idea. There are really 2 ways that these ideas form. Firstly, outside in. Here we have a number of serendipitous ideas and connections that come together and at some point develop enough that they emerge to become a new idea. Alternatively, we have the inside out approach, where people have a problem that they have to solve. And it's through the exploration of the problem space and piecing together various options and potential parts of a solution that they come up with a new idea. If you're interested in the creative process, Stephen Johnson has a number of videos that discuss the process of innovation and creativity and how it is important to create an environment that enables ideas to percolate, for people to take time to combine ideas and for new ideas to emerge. The concept of allowing the space and time for creativity is an important aspect of innovation. New ideas occur because a diverse range of different views, experiences, expertise, and knowledge come together to combine and enable a new idea to develop. New ideas develop around us all of the time. Stephen Johnson tells a great story in his TED video about the evolution of the innovation of GPS and how it was a side project for a group of scientists who were tracking the journey of Sputnik using radio and microwaves that actually led to the creation of GPS. Most of these types of ideas are actually the culmination of bits of ideas from different times and places that come together at a point in time. Often it is just then that the ability to recognize the idea which has come together is the right one. Is the idea the right one, however, for the time that you are in? So, in summary, there is very little that is new under the sun. Instead, you need to think about combining old ideas or remixing ideas. New ideas that take off often come from an adjacent possible idea space. Often, if it's too new, then the world may not actually be ready for it. Ideas usually need to percolate and emerge at the right time. Eureka moments are mostly fictional. Instead, the discovery usually comes at the end of a long series of near discoveries. So what it is a collision of smaller hunches. The sole inventor working alone is almost always a myth. Instead, ideas often come from numerous people working together and bringing different pieces of the puzzle together to create something new. Serendipity happens. Some innovators conduct themselves in a way that encourages happy accidents. Hence, chance favours the connected mind. And finally, failure and error often generate success. We learn from our mistakes. Mistakes are good learning experiences. So use them.